Greywater Adventurers Guild. Templar Justina Faircourt. By Wesley Allison. Copyright 2023. Chapter 1. The Templar. Alaric Sindar slowly opened his eyes. His eyelids felt like sandpaper. He turned his head to look to the left and immediately wished he hadn't. His brain exploded with pain. He moaned, only to find out that his mouth tasted like something had died in it. Why? Why do I keep doing this to myself? God, why do you keep letting me do this to myself? He looked slowly around. He was in a bed, in a room, somewhere. At least he was in a bed and in a room. Slowly sitting up, he tried to look around without moving his head. His clothes were strewn across the floor. The room smelled of sex, but he couldn't remember who was responsible for that. Looking down at himself, he realized that he was at least partially responsible. He slowly picked up his clothing, putting on each piece as he found it: underpants, breeches, shirt, jerkin, belt. He could only find one stocking, so he put it on his right foot. He put on his boots and, finally, his cap. He found his purse on the table by the bed. It still had 8 shillings and 6 pence in it, though there was no sign of the 6 florins he remembered having the day before. Walking very slowly, Alaric stepped out of the room and onto a landing, overlooking the main room at the Tulip. It was deserted, which meant that it was sometime between sunrise and early afternoon. It took him 10 minutes to negotiate the 2 flights of stairs down to the main floor. He stopped to lean on the bar. "How you doing, Alaric?" Alaric looked to see Big Ike wiping down glasses. "Been better, Ike. I can whip you up a 2-pence cure, if you like." "Sure," Alaric replied, fishing out the 2 copper coins and setting them on the bar. Big Ike fiddled around with several bottles and then set down a pewter cup about half full of a murky liquid. Alaric picked it up and took a sniff. "Bloody hell, what's in this?" "It's a secret, but it's guaranteed to cure what ails you." "Worth a try, I guess. By the way, do you have any idea who I was with last night?" "Nope. Just came on." Alaric gave him a brief nod and then tossed back the entire contents of the cup. He hadn't even set it back on the counter when projectile vomit shot from his throat, covering Big Ike from nose to belt. "Struth. You're right. I do feel better." Turning, Alaric walked out the front door into the bright sunshine. He had to stop and cover his eyes. He could hear Big Ike retching behind him. The Tulip was a brothel and not necessarily one of the better ones. It was, however, one that Alaric Sindar frequented. It was just inside the Garter Park gate and only a block away from the Greywater Adventurers Guild. It was a quick walk, even in his current condition, though the breeze off the bay brought a shiver with it. A smart man would be wearing a cloak, but then a smart man would remember where he had left that cloak. The streets were not busy, though there were a few carts going here and there, a few people on horseback and maybe more than a few people on foot. Alaric paid none of them much attention. Before he knew it, he had reached his destination. The Adventurers Guild was a 4-story freestanding structure facing an open area that people sometimes called Garter Park Playground or Garter Plaza, though its official name, which almost nobody remembered, was the White Spire Hay Market. A large swinging double door marked the guild's entrance, and Alaric passed through it into the relatively dark interior. The door opened directly into the guild parlor. 20 round tables dominated the large space, and around each were 4 to 6 chairs. Most were empty at this time. 3 men sat talking and smoking on the left side of the room, while a man and a woman, the latter wearing leather armor, were seated on the right. "Goran, Zoran, Mill," said Alaric, nodding to the men on the left. Alaric nodded Mill, a white-bearded fellow, between puffs of his pipe. "Varn, Alondra," said Alaric, nodding to the couple on the right. "Don't talk to me, you pig," hissed the woman, Alondra. At the back of the guild parlor was a long counter, behind which stood Merwin, the guild secretary, an attractive redhead in a simple green skirt and a brown leather corset that left a good deal of cleavage spilling over the top. "Good morning, Merwin," said Alaric, leaning on the counter. "Or is it past noon yet?" "God's blood, Alaric. You look like shite. Your skin is pasty, you've got huge bags under your eyes, and you smell like a whorehouse. And it's 11 m. Thanks. Have you seen Arella, Ham, or Dustin today? Not so far today. Maybe they'll be here for the midday meal. All right, said Alaric. You couldn't loan me £2, could you? You know that's against the rules. Yeah. A hand slapped down 2 gold coins onto the counter. Alaric turned to find Varn at his side. Varn was a big man, a good 6 inches taller than he was, though their builds were similar. Varn's blonde hair was parted in the middle and pulled back in a ponytail. A quick glance told Alaric that Varn's partner Alondra was on her way out the door. Booze or whores? The big man asked. My landlady. I'm 4 weeks in arrears, and she won't let me in to get a change of clothes. I expect to be paid back. You should stop and get a bath too. My very next stop, said Alaric. An hour and a half later, Alaric was back in the Adventurers Guild. He had visited the bathhouse and then his apartments, where, after paying the £2 to his landlady, he had changed into clean clothes. It felt good to be clean, and it felt good to have 2 socks again. The parlour was much busier than it had been. There were more than 20 people now. Most of them were eating. That was one of the best things about being a member of the Adventurers Guild. Free meals at midday and supper. Alaric strolled over to the food wagon and grabbed a plate. There were sausages and fried fish, chips, asparagus, yams with butter, spätzle, and brown bread. Plate filled to overflowing, he found an empty table. No sooner had he sat down than Myrna was at his side. She was a slight, little thing, in pantaloons, her dark brown hair cut short like a boy's. A beer for you, Alaric? You know it, lass. She was back with the beer in less than 2 minutes. Alaric was already working his way through the sausages, his knife his only utensil. A tall, thin boy pulled out a chair and sat across from him. He was wearing a blue robe over a white shirt and brown pants. A wispy hint of a mustache, that was meant to make him look older, had the opposite effect. I want you to join my party, Alaric. You don't have a party, Elwyn. If you join me, we can get a 3rd and then a 4th. Then we're off to fame and fortune. And what part are you going to play in this little party of yours? Alaric started on his fried fish. I can handle myself with a sword, and Master Bauntor said he would train me in magic. I'll be ready to go in no time. You need to sign on now, before it's too late. I'm going to have a lot of offers coming my way, just as soon as I know a few spells. Besides, your friends are planning to dump you. You're too unreliable. I heard Arella say so in this very room. Piss off, kid. Come and see me after you can pull a rabbit out of your arse. Elwyn jumped to his feet. You'll be sorry, he shouted as he stomped away. Should have taken the kid up on it, called Ursula from 2 tables over. She was a plain-looking woman with a blonde bob cut. She was wearing pants and a jerkin and, oddly, had her sword laying upon the table. Maybe you should take him up, said Alaric. I saw Varn and Alondra in their armor earlier. Did they take off on some job without you? Don't you worry about me, she said. You expecting trouble? Asked Alaric, taking a bite of bread. He nodded toward her sword. Course not. Just got it sharpened. She got up and walked to the east wall, where the jobs were posted. The front door opened and 3 people walked in, 1 woman and 2 men. They took a quick look around and then walked directly to Alaric's table and sat down. The 3 were Arella, Hamlin, and Dustin, his comrades. Arella was a beautiful woman, with long black hair and strikingly pale blue eyes. She wore a black and white leather jerkin over a white dress, cut longer in the back than the front, allowing a black underdress to peek through. Hamlin was a tall man in his early 40s, with close-cropped black hair and only the first hints of grey. His usually neatly trimmed beard and mustache were in slight disarray. He wore a simple brown shirt and leather pants, with boots. On his belt were 12 inches of braided brown hair, a memento from his wife that he was never without. Dustin was a heavily muscled fellow about Alaric's age. He had short brown hair with a few days' growth of beard, but his clothes were new, pantaloons and a doublet. Sober for a change? Arella asked. She looked like she had bitten into something sour. Fit and ready for work, said Alaric. Why don't you all get some food, and I'll have Myrna bring you all out some beer? Alaric, said Dustin. We've been thinking that it would be better if we went our own way. What? You want to split up the group? Hamlin spoke up. He means we think you should go a different way from us. You can't dump me. 3 people isn't enough. Most of the teams have 5. You guys will get killed. We'll get somebody else, said Dustin. We'll get paid, said Arella. You know how many jobs we've had to pass up because you weren't where you should have been. I'll do better. Goodbye, Alaric, she said. Then all 3 of them stood up and went to the food wagon, and when they had their food, they sat down at a table across the room from him. Another beer? Asked Myrna, sliding a mug in front of him. Tough break. At that moment, the front door opened again, and a girl walked in. She was tiny, no more than 5 feet tall, and very thin, with long blonde hair and large golden eyes. She was wearing a white chest plate and pauldrons with matching boots. Beneath the armor was a crimson top with long sleeves and a white skirt. She had a large book held fast to her hip by a belt, and she carried a massive war hammer. On her chest, her boots, her shoulders, and on the cover of the book, in solid gold, was the symbol of the hammer. What's she supposed to be? Wondered Myrna. She's supposed to be a Templar of the Church of Ascension, said Alaric. The diminutive Templar walked slowly through the parlor. Every single person in the room had stopped eating to watch her. As she passed, Alaric slowly got to his feet and followed. When she reached the counter, he stopped right behind her, realizing for the first time that a dozen others had followed her as well and now stood in a crowd. Can I help you, miss? Asked Merwin. I'm here to join the Adventurers Guild. Her voice was high, like a little girl. It's a one-time fee of £100. Oh yes. The white-armored girl pulled out a small red bag and set it, with a clink, on the counter. Merwin quickly scooped it up and placed it somewhere below. She produced a pen, an inkwell, and a piece of parchment. I need some basic information. Name? Justina Angela Faircourt. Age? 18. You're kidding, said someone to Alaric's right. She looks like she's 12, said someone else. Birthplace, continued Merwin. Populonia. Quite a bit of hushed conversation broke out in the crowd. Populonia was on the other side of the kingdom, more than 300 miles away. Quiet, snapped the secretary before continuing. Next of kin? Bishop Constantius Rustin. I guess that's everything we need, said Merwin. We still have the midday meal out if you'd like to sit down and eat. That would be lovely. I've been fasting. But first, can you tell me where I can find a man named Alaric Sindar?